It's not just our emotions that take a hit. Our brain actually remodels itself in response to this. There are receptors in our brain, and then we have neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin that can become altered, which then significantly impedes our ability to cope effectively. This shutdown is often a protective mechanism, a signal from your body saying, hey, time out. Welcome to the Butterfly Event Podcast. This podcast is all about embracing emotional regulation and emotional resilience. I'm your host, Heather Hewett, double board certified naturopath, clinical nutritionist, and somatic trauma therapy certified. Today's episode I'm really excited about because I'm going to break down the science of depression and shutdown from the perspective of the nervous system. Please like and subscribe if you find that this episode resonates with you and you just like the podcast. So imagine this. You're at work. Deadlines are stacking up, just like planes in a traffic jam. Or just life, and suddenly your mind goes blank. It's as if a switch was flicked off. In many ways, the experience of this functional shutdown can be likened to how our digital devices malfunction. We've all had that before. When they face too much input or demand, they freeze up. It turns out the nervous system and brain has limits as well. Well, I find this is the perfect time of year for this subject because I live in the Midwest and we are in deep winter right now. And I used to experience seasonal affective disorder. And we all get a bit of the winter blues, especially with extreme weather. But shutdown happens more frequently than we know. Hibernation kicks in due to shorter days and cold weather. Then add to that, if you have the stress of life, you just feel like you're in survival mode. And it takes so much just to get anything done. When we experience persistent stress, it's not just our emotions that take a hit. Our brain actually remodels itself in response to this. There are receptors in our brain, and then we have neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin that can become altered, which then significantly impedes our ability to cope effectively. This shutdown is often a protective mechanism, a signal from your body saying, hey, time out. Let's take a step back and reset. Learning how to reset is vital. When we aren't aware or have knowledge of what's going on, it could seem really scary. At the end of this podcast, I'm going to demonstrate a couple of somatic techniques that can equip you for challenges that lie ahead. Because as I mentioned, life happens, unforeseen things take place. We all have so much on our plate day in and day out. So breaking down the science from the viewpoint of the nervous system, I'm going to give a breakdown of what's actually happening. And I want to credit Peter Levine in Body Lab, as well as a therapist. I really enjoy watching Emma McAdam too for some of the information that I share. I'm going to share my own personal stories and experiences around this. In extreme cases of stress, we have the nervous system. So the nervous system has a few different branches, and one of them is called the dorsal branch. I'm sure many of you may have heard of the vagus nerve. These types of responses happen in reaction to stress and overwhelm and initiates a shutdown response, leading to a state of immobilization or numbness. This shutdown is often explained as a state of hypoarousal or disassociation. While the concept of freezing in response to a crisis is widely recognized, there's less awareness about the prolonged states of withdrawal and disconnection that can occur. You want to isolate yourself. You feel isolated. This phenomenon is sometimes referred to as dorsal vagal shutdown, but within the broader scientific community is more commonly described as hypoarousal, tonic immobility, or the freeze response, which is all characterized by a significant withdrawal from interaction with the world in general. The nervous system response can be triggered by trauma, but can also result from sensory overload, leading to what many call a sensory shutdown. Understanding this concept is really important for neurodivergent or highly sensitive people. We are more prone to having these experiences more often and in intensity. Dorsal vagal shutdown can be thought as the body's natural way of hitting the pause button, especially when faced with extreme stress and trauma. In this state, everything slows down internally to conserve energy. That's why you feel like you're dragging your body around. It's like dimming the lights and lowering the volume in response to overwhelming conditions. This response is managed by the dorsal branch of the vagus nerve, which can trigger what's often referred to as a freeze state. This hypoarousal is widely recognized in neurobiology. Hypoarousal refers to a state where the nervous system downregulates its activity in response to overwhelming stress or trauma, leading to symptoms such as fatigue, disassociation, and emotional numbness. You feel disconnected from your body and everyone else. For neurodivergent individuals or highly sensitive, these people in particular, and we're going to even go more specific than that, those with autism or that are autistic, understanding this type of shutdown is crucial. Research suggests that compared to non-autistic individuals, autistic people may be more prone to experiencing a shutdown response to stress rather than that typical fight or flight reaction. This can sometimes manifest as an outward appearance of calmness, which actually may mask significant internal disconnection and immobility. Recognizing this distinction is important as it highlights the profound, though often invisible ways that stress impacts neurodivergent individuals. To explore more about the neurodivergent nervous system and its unique responses, you can Google this and you will find research there. And I plan on having more information concerning this on future podcasts. I want to go into my experience a bit. For me, I do experience shutdown on a regular basis. Not as often as I used to and not as intensely. And I want to make sure that I emphasize that it is a spectrum, just like anything. Just like any disorder, any illness, there's a spectrum. So there was one particular time I can think of when I had my worst shutdown after losing my daughter. I cannot compare that to less shutdowns that I've had since then. So I don't want you to compare because shutdown is shutdown and it may not look and feel the same. But once we get to know what that feeling is like, it'll be easier for us to be able to navigate it and also see and feel when it's coming on. So one experience I had, and I'm going to go specifically with something that happened every year, thinking of the living in the Midwest and it being wintertime. Seasonal affective disorder. I was actually diagnosed with that. I had severe depression and anxiety in the dead of winter, around the time of year of January, February, even March. Went to different psychiatrists, tried different medications, helped a tiny bit, but of course, still struggled and had a hard time. Also, I want to say I tried different supplement therapy, that help boost neurotransmitters, as well as amino acid therapy and cofactors, and you name it. I tried the best of everything out there and spent thousands of dollars around that and tried different holistic modalities. So nothing touched it. I wasn't looking for a cure. I was just looking to feel normal and functional. I dreaded every year that happening. We moved to Florida, and guess what? Even with all the sun, the cold being gone, I still experience seasonal affective disorder. And that's because it was not a biochemical issue. It was not a brain issue. It was managing my nervous system, which I know how to do now, and I'm able to come out of shutdown pretty quickly. I see it coming on, and I'm able to come out of it. Now, when my nervous system is overwhelmed, I have days that are really, really long. By the end of the day, I can tell I'm headed towards shutdown, and there are different things that I need to do. And I'm getting better and better at that. And that's the point. I mean, practice makes better. There is a segment in my somatic trauma therapy certification on complex PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex PTSD is when we've had more than one significant trauma that has occurred in our lives. And I know I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. A symptom of that is dorsal vagal shutdown. Significant trauma that has occurred for people more than once can cause this pattern to be set up of dorsal vagal shutdown. And of course, if you're experiencing this now, please seek professional help. That can go a long way to help you to overcome this. A key point, too, is we don't get stuck in our brain, even though it kind of feels that way. We actually get stuck in our body. This is why oftentimes I've had many clients, as well as myself, they run to the doctor and psychiatrist. They diagnose you, put you on some type of psychotropic medication. I can't tell you, I've been to at least 10 maybe psychiatrists in my life, and each and every one diagnosed me with something different. Each and every one prescribed a different medication. And I have to admit, it was the same way with holistic functional medicine doctors or doctors I've seen too. Same thing. The theory of serotonin has been debunked with randomized controlled trials or human outcome data. This has been disproven that low serotonin is the cause of depression. It may be something that is a symptom or one of the factors, part of depression, but is not the sole reason of having depression. Depression is a symptom of more complex or a cluster of issues that has many root causes, such as trauma, underlying endocrine dysfunction, such as adrenal, thyroid, ovary dysfunction, grief, maybe from loss, maybe loss of job or loss of friend, loss of a loved one, low self-esteem. A pill or supplement will not cure that all of itself. It may get rid of a symptom, but is not getting to the root cause. That's why when I work with my clients, I don't use amino acid therapy and supplements and all those things anymore. We get to the root cause. And if they need a doctor, I wholly support them and recommend that they go for that. And as a matter of fact, I really prefer that they go first before even working with me, and then we can work in tandem. But depression is a symptom or reaction, not the cause. Depression is a subconscious nervous system response to stress, trauma, or overwhelm. It's not strictly a brain issue. The nervous system takes information through our senses. Not only our traditional senses like hearing, touch, and taste and seeing, but through other senses like kinesthetic, thermoception, nociception, chronoception, electroception, and more. Many of these senses, the nervous system takes in through many of these senses and sends that info to the brain. Then the brain takes that information and responds and reacts accordingly, processes it, and decisions are made. Through our physical traditional senses, I'm going to give you an example. You touch a hot stove. We have sensory neurons in our hand that sends pain signals to the brain, which then quickly triggers a motor response to pull your hand back. As far as mental and emotional sensory example, a child is in a situation or circumstance such as an abusive home. Parents are going through a divorce. They may be having trouble at school. Some situation where they're out of control, they don't have the authority to do anything about it, and most importantly, they don't have skills at this point. So they accept it, they witness it, and they go and do whatever it is to make them feel normal or safe. The only choice or chance that they have at feeling normal is withdrawing and isolating. That could be seen as physically withdrawing and isolating to a safe space in the house, their room, their closet, or mentally and emotionally withdrawing. For me, I did it by eating as many Oreo cookies or whatever sugary thing I can get my hand on. Even video games, TV watching, soda, smoking, vaping, hanging with the wrong crowd, whatever they can do to avoid that pain. Add to that being highly sensitive and neurodivergent. We feel pain, it seems, and feels like 100 times more than a neurotypical person. Finding a way to escape. And we do this because we don't have the skills yet needed. It's a way to detach and disassociate from our bodies. It becomes a pattern, a go-to, or a way of life. Fear is the trigger. That's what's behind it mostly. Acute stress is one thing that could happen once or twice, but then when stress becomes chronic, over time, this wears down the nervous system. I hear from clients all the time, and I have to agree. We can't handle things the way we used to. It seems like as we get older, it gets harder and harder. And that's because our nervous system, our nerves are feeling frayed and run down. This pattern develops as a fail-safe. And when you think of an overloaded power strip where we plug in devices, imagine too many are plugged in. What happens? It shuts off. An overloaded circuit shuts off or shuts down. Physical and emotional threats, if we're experiencing this day in and day out on an ongoing basis, this constant trauma wears down the circuitry and triggers depression and shutdown. Our nervous system protects us by going into shutdown. And this can even happen from our own intrusive thoughts. That is something I had battled with for so many years, of having these chronic intrusive negative thought loops. That can also wear our nervous system down. Chronic feelings are thought of not being safe because maybe we aren't in a safe physical or emotional mental environment. So to go into the nervous system a bit, there are 3 states of the nervous system. The autonomic nervous system has 1, the ventral vagal state. This is the parasympathetic default state where we feel calm, connected, and compassionate. We don't go to judgment when someone does something. We feel compassionate and curious as to why they did that, but we don't feel like we want to react. And we feel motivated but relaxed. This is the rest and digest state. We experience happiness, joy, and peace. Then there's the sympathetic state, reaching deadlines, running late, rushing out the door. Small trigger responses and reactions happen. The bigger the threat, the bigger the reaction that we get from our nervous system. We can feel like we need to fight. If there's a bigger threat, we may want to run or freeze. Then there's the dorsal vagal state, the hypoarousal that we're talking about, or the shutdown state, where there's complete overwhelm, overload, exhausted, numb, frozen, shut down, unmotivated, isolated from others. You feel disconnected from yourself and others. You feel discombobulated, almost like you're living in a dream world at times. Now, everybody can experience this differently. You just don't feel like yourself. Again, this isn't just in our heads or something we can just say, oh, just get over it, or tell someone else, oh, just get over it. This is based on science. The technical scientific term is tonic immobility. This happens in animals, and in humans, this manifests as depression. And whether this happens in animals or humans, it's the same thing. Dorsal vagal shutdown or hypoarousal. Chronic stress and trauma can also trigger this response. Your body believes it's keeping you safe and protecting you. It's a survival response to conserve energy. This state can be triggered by the death of a loved one or something heavy like the loss of a job, bullying, or chronic low-level stress like dealing with finances or abuse in the home or being a caregiver. Also, a heavy acute trauma, always being on alert, high level of stress and hypervigilance. Then one day, collapse occurs. The instinctual response and then going into collapse and shutdown occurs. And we see this in the animal world when an animal is caught by a predator. I know I've seen this on nature shows. And I'm wondering, are they dead? And they aren't. They went into shutdown and collapse. For animals, it looks like that. For humans, it feels like that. Think back to patterns you had as a child when there was trauma, chronic or acute stress. What did you do? Did you isolate, withdraw, or try to escape? I know for me, I escaped into food, especially sugary foods. I watched a lot of fantasy movies when I could. I escaped into that. None of that is bad, and none of what I'm saying is bad for you to do. But when you escape and you feel disconnected, you're running away and not experiencing life, and you feel like this is your only way to cope, then it's a pattern that gets locked in. It's a learned habit and pattern because you don't have skills yet. Hypoarousal is a form of disassociation to avoid pain. It serves a function. It's a survival coping pattern. Negative thoughts can be chronic stress as well, as I mentioned earlier, like, I'm not enough, things will never get better, no one loves or cares about me, I'm not lovable, or imagining the worst happening, which I have a tendency to do. Your brain then perceives danger from the overwhelming negative thought loops we get into. Then we numb out and disassociate. Overwhelm can trigger this dorsal vagal shutdown too. And if we experience this, it doesn't mean necessarily if we're experiencing shutdown that we had trauma growing up. We may not have had trauma, but it could be the way our nervous system reacts or the way we are wired. We can learn to watch the signs our body is giving us. Our bodies give us a warning ahead of time. We can notice emotions, feelings, and then our behaviors with this. For instance, at one point, I used to get a lot of migraines. My body was in a pattern of this. I learned over time that my body sent me signals. I would experience an aura or pressure behind an eye, or my eye would start twitching. I knew that soon a migraine was coming. It's the same way before we go into shutdown or any type of, or which is an underreacting, but even overreacting. We can learn that over time with practice. I love to use for myself and clients the emotion sensation wheel and the emotion behavior wheel. Learning how to identify emotions, then feelings, then sensations, and then behaviors that come. Once we recognize our pattern by using these wheels, we can best work with our bodies and prevent these types of shutdowns from happening or the severity of the shutdowns. I help people orient themselves. I show them and teach them grounding techniques and somatic techniques that help them feel connected and safe in their body. I want to also speak about movement and how important that is. Movement is the key to waking up the nervous system. Exercise is the best way over any supplement or medication to wake up and bring someone out of shutdown. When we move, we're telling our bodies we are out of danger and we are safe. Think about the animal that goes into the immobility. Ideally, doing something like a 45-minute cardio or weightlifting session would be ideal, but let's face it, when we're in shutdown, we can't even wrap our mind around doing that. So somatic techniques can come in and help. I had a time of shutdown recently when it was really cold out. My body did not want to do anything. But I also know how my brain and body works. If my body's saying, oh, I don't want to do anything, and I don't do it, it happens over and over and over again, and I'm struggling and fighting. I like to keep my habits in the automatic place in my brain where I automatically do it unless there's an emergency or I get sick. So this particular day was kind of a struggle, and I felt like I was in shutdown due to the extreme cold and what took place the day before. So I did my regular spiritual routine and study. I did that, and I got downstairs. 10 minutes in, I still wasn't feeling it, and I was really struggling. I mean, probably one of the most intense times of talk of quitting ever. So I remember I stopped and I did my couple of my somatic routines with coming out of that shutdown, and it got me moving, it got me going. So it worked really well, and I was able to continue. This is what I teach clients to be able to navigate these types of situations really easily. An example of somatic work is shaking like animals do. We've watched the Nature Channel where we saw the animals shaking after they were chasing another animal or being chased and got away. This was the way that they grounded themselves, and they got rid of excess energy that was in the nervous system. It signals and messages the nervous system that you are safe and okay. And it's the opposite of disassociation when we connect with our bodies and others, which is really important because this is what happens when we're in shutdown. So what may help? Well, we want to reestablish connection by focusing on our breath first. This would be the quickest, most reliable way to activate the nervous system. One of the ways we can do this too is by sighing, like something like that. According to Dr. Andrew Huberman and the research that was done on this, sighing can help activate the nervous system, as well as focused breathing. I have shared on this podcast focused breathing around bringing ourselves down from anxiety and calming ourselves with a deep inhale, but with a longer exhale, such as But the opposite is true when we're in shutdown. We can do a longer inhale and a short exhale, which will activate the nervous system and call it to action. So deep sighing, deep breathing. There's 2 tools that we learned. I'm going to show you a couple of more tools that can help. One of them, since I mentioned with movement being so important, is called the arm circle. So we're moving our arms like this. And remember, dorsal vagal shutdown stems from the nervous system going into protective mode. When we engage in rhythmic movement, so if you wanted to get up, you put your favorite song on and dance and move, that would be great too. The key is to just move. We're actually signaling the brain that it's safe to move again. I do talk about brain training a lot, but I'm a bit more body-based. Brain training is so important. But training the nervous system is a huge part of it. And doing movements like this somatically brings the body and mind into connection. It integrates both of them. Also increases circulation by bringing oxygen and blood flow, resulting in the regulation of your nervous system and brain, where you just feel good. So another technique is called body squeezing. We're not squeezing the mess out of our body, just a nice gentle squeeze, and we work our way down. We can work our way up the other side, doing some nice breathing at the same time. We can work on our legs the same way. We use both hands on both legs, working up and down our legs, giving it a nice squeeze. As I'm doing this and taking deep breaths, I feel blood circulating. And that's the idea of it, is getting your nervous system activated, is telling your brain, remember this important message, that it's safe and okay. That's the message. This was one of my favorite topics. And as I wrap up today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in. And today we took a deep look into depression and dorsal vagal shutdown. You heard my experience and story of what it feels like and what I did to bounce forward. We practiced a few exercises that can help you come out of shutdown safely and compassionately. I will cover even more on the brain and nervous system in future episodes, how we can tone our vagus nerve, and brain training that can help us to become more resilient. Always remember the journey of emotional mastery is just that, a journey. It's your journey. By understanding the science of our brains and nervous system and implementing these tools, we can navigate our emotions with grace and resilience. If you find you need more support or one-on-one coaching, please visit my website. Fill out the contact info at heathermhewitt.com. And if you found this episode enlightening, please share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights on your mental and emotional well-being. Remember to embrace the change and then discover the beauty of transformation and embrace your inner butterfly.